Sam Seder here. This is the live broadcast of the Majority Report. And as you probably have heard, there's a bit of a YouTube apocalypse that has been going on. Many news and politics channels have lost their advertising because of an algorithm that Google has implemented as a function of ads showing up on hate-filled channels. Well, we got caught up in that, and it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved. So we need your help. You've probably heard from other channels that they're asking people to donate to a Patreon site. We are asking the same so that we can operate this YouTube feed without a cost to us. I mean, we don't look at YouTube as a huge revenue maker for us, but we need your help so that we're not losing money on it. So head over to our Patreon site. Here is the URL. We need your help. Just a couple of bucks, $2-3 a month would really help us out. Thanks so much and enjoy the show. Hi, folks.
Majority Report with Sam Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Tuesday, May 16th, 2017. My name is Sam Seder. This is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Professor Kim Phillips-Fein, author of Fear City, New York's Fiscal Crisis and the Rise of Austerity Politics. Also on the program today, Donald Trump accused of giving top secret info to Russians in order to make his PP seem bigger.
You have briefing book. You are a great man.
Yes, I am a great man.
They give you papers? Oh my gosh.
They don't give black president
Wow.
paper. They give it to you within a couple of weeks.
You're a real man. What color paper do they give you? Can we see? Following their ongoing attempts of destroying the Affordable Care Act, Republicans now looking to slash more funding for those living in poverty. Republicans in Senate want to, I should say, conservatives in Senate want to nuke the reconciliation rules. Trump and Republicans expanding the abortion gag rule will hurt AIDS, malaria, other medical services, particularly in Africa. And a Russian money laundering case is settled. Records forever sealed. Lastly, an award-winning journalist, Javier Valdez, shot to death in Mexico. All that and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. General McMaster's just had another press briefing to argue that, well, what Donald Trump did was not a big deal. And I don't know. I mean, what's clear is this was not the plan. That's the one thing you can be clear. He didn't break any laws, arguably broke the oath he took of office. Not terribly relevant until the Republicans decide that they've got enough tax cuts and cuts to benefits for middle class and people living in poverty. But the one thing that's clear is this was not the plan.
No. I don't think
And
that was ever the game plan.
Donald Trump just shooting off the hip, maybe one of those awkward silences. You don't know what to say when you're seeing, you're reunited with your buddies after a long time.
That would actually be a great tactic in general with him, just filling the awkward silence. It's like, so it's nice here in Washington.
Hey guys,
look
I got
we just
secret
found
intelligence.
secret intelligence about
But yeah, anything Syria, Iran, whatever. I mean,
What was the quote? The quote was, I mean, I have it here somewhere, but I'm not. The quote was something like, I get great intelligence. We have the best intelligence. They bring it to me every day. I mean, it's like.
He is so breathtakingly moronic.
Some people say it's stupidity, but I really do think like untreated syphilis is moving to the forefront of most obvious explanation for this guy's behavior. I mean, it's just absurd and obscene, and it is, do not forget this, it is enabled every single day by Paul Ryan. It is, and
he doesn't have the syphilis excuse.
And let me repeat what I said on Twitter last night, too, was I don't care if you're a never-Trumper. If you supported Mitt Romney when he went and made Donald Trump a kingmaker in 2012, if you didn't complain about John Boehner not telling members of his caucus, hey, cut it out with this, birtherism and introducing laws to promote birtherism. If you didn't have a problem with John McCain picking Sarah Palin, then I don't give an F what you're saying today. Honestly. Donald Trump is your creation. And Ben Shapiro wrote back, well, Hillary Clinton, we blame you then for Hillary Clinton not beating him. And I said, and I did. Touche. I apologize for not being able to defeat the monster you created. That your entire professional life has been dedicated to bringing about in one form or another. It just so happened maybe you were on the wrong side of his largesse. And so you decided to go on to another side. But give me a break. This is what they built this. They want credit for it. They built it. And all of those people, John McCain picking Sarah Palin, the idea that he's not reminded of that every time he goes on to the Saturday morning or Sunday morning talk shows. You could do it politely. You just frame the question like, Senator McCain, you have a real problem with Donald Trump, even though you picked Sarah Palin, who was the prototype for Donald Trump's entire politics. What is your thoughts on what Trump did? I mean, you could just work it in like that. If it's Sunday morning, it's Meet the Press with Senator John McCain, the guy who picked Sarah Palin. That's all the way you do.
Very polite.
He's a maverick. He might not come back.
Right.
I thought they were very rude to you. You're my favorite man ever.
So, Saul, of course, was up until 11:30 last night.
Are you serious?
I am totally serious. And this happens 3 times a week, I would say now. Saul is lying there. I am literally have to put the full weight of my arm across his body to keep him from getting up at 11 o'clock because I am now falling asleep in his bed, which, as you know, is the most comfortable bed in my house. Why? Because the Casper is an obsessively engineered mattress. It also just happens to be available at a shockingly fair price. Supportive memory foams create an award-winning sleep surface with just the right sink and just the right bounce. And here's the best part. You try Casper for 100 nights risk-free in your own home. What? That's crazy. I'm used to going to a mattress store and spending 30 seconds on it before I get kicked out of there. If you don't love it, they'll pick it up and refund you everything. Casper understands the importance of truly sleeping on a mattress before you commit, especially considering you're going to spend a third of your life on it. Unless you have children. In that case, it's probably going to be like 1/18. Free shipping and returns to U.S. and Canada. What? In Canada? You better order a lot of them up there because I have a feeling you're going to have some house guests soon. With over 20,000 reviews and an average of 4.8 stars, it's quickly becoming the internet's favorite mattress. Get $50 toward any mattress purchase by visiting Casper.com/majority and using the offer code majority. You go to Casper.com/majority, use the offer code majority, get $50 off. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to professor of history at New York's University Gallatin School of Individualized Study, Kim Phillips-Fein, on Fear City, New York's fiscal crisis and the rise of austerity politics. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Kim Phillips-Fein. She is a professor of history at New York University's Gallatin School of Individualized Study, written for The Nation, Dissent, The Baffler, Atlantic, The New York Times, author of her latest book, Fear City, New York's Fiscal Crisis and the Rise of Austerity Politics. Welcome to the program, Kim.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is fascinating stuff for me, partly because I remember this era from afar and from visiting New York at that time, having had been born there a little bit before this era. And also, I just recently watched an Adam Curtis film where he talks about this era in not with nearly the depth, obviously, that you've covered here, but with a similar disposition towards what happened. And why don't you give us a sense of what New York was like? Let's start with like in the mid to late 60s, because I think people don't realize how successful New York was for a city this size to be middle class at that time.
Right. I think that's really true. People don't remember, or the ways in which New York, which is now, well known as a pretty difficult place to live as a middle-class person, but the ways in which it was much easier in the middle years of the 20th century. So New York in the middle years of the 20th century had a kind of extensive, almost like a local welfare state, or kind of an extensive and generous public sector. It had the tuition was free at the city university system, which was expanding during the 40s, 50s, and 60s. The public school system was, there was no question that it was mixed, but there was a certain, the way today public schools rely very heavily on the kind of contributions and fundraising of parents to provide all kinds of extracurricular activities. That really wasn't the case then. There was remarkable funding for art and music education in the city's public schools. The mass transit system was, extensive and also quite low cost in comparison to the rising fares and service problems of today. And the city as a whole had a kind of, there was a very high labor union. The labor unions were quite powerful in the city at this time. There was a certain kind of egalitarian ethos in the culture of the city through really from the end of the New Deal years going into the 40s, 50s, and early 60s.
And you had there was also, at least some very major projects for middle-class housing, right? Like Peter Cooper Village and Stuyvesant Town and others around the city. And we should also... go ahead.
Yeah, there were kind of major middle-class housing developments, as well as, a kind of expansion. This is the expansion, the construction and expansion of public housing in the city, which was, although it kind of wound up being increasingly for low-income residents, I think the initial vision was that it wouldn't be as much a kind of concentration of poor people, but that it was it was a kind of expansion of the inexpensive housing stock in the city, something that was really, remarkable by the standards of today.
And we should also say that the number of intellectual luminaries and government luminaries that came out of City College, educated for free, almost defined a generation in some respects.
Yeah, no, City College was, and really not, I think it's, City College was, kind of extraordinary educational institution, and really the whole City University of New York system, which was, I think it's also, it wasn't just the kind of flagship schools of City College, Brooklyn College, but the sort of expansion of the system during the 50s and 60s, that is really remarkable. The creation of the community colleges. I would also mention actually the public health resources of the city. The city had a very dynamic public health department. It operated more than 20 at the peak municipal hospitals. There were primary care clinics throughout the city as well. There was also actually an effort to create and then to expand city-subsidized daycare for low-income people, for working-class and low-income people. This network of daycares also grew during the 1960s.
So then what happens? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. The expansion of the city's public sector over these years, and I should say actually also, there is a kind of tradition of public works, which begins during the 1930s. And is the kind of heavily financed by federal funds coming from the kind of New Deal public works programs and projects. And this tradition of public works, of building parks, swimming pools, and the like, this continues during the 40s and 50s as well. So the entire, there is a kind of growing tension about the size and scope of the city's public sector, which intensifies during the 1960s. There are many people in the city's business and financial elites who are critical of the city's spending on these programs. And their criticism comes partly from anxiety about paying higher taxes, but it also, I think, reflects a certain sense of the political contest over the city, the question of whose voice matters, whose voice counts. Because I think the expansion of the city's public sector doesn't just happen. It happens in part in response to community pressure, to organizing among poor people, organizing among people of color in New York during the 60s, the civil rights and black freedom movements in the North and in New York in particular are part of the impetus for the growth of the city's public sector. And so there's a way in which there's a struggle, a sense that it's a contest over the city's future. One example of this comes in 1966 when there is a proposal to impose a stock transfer tax. So this will kind of take a small tax every time a stock certificate changes hands. The New York Stock Exchange actually at this point threatens to move out of New York altogether, going to either Connecticut, or there was even some brief discussion of moving to a city in California. So this is a kind of, and this was seriously discussed. It wasn't just a threat, although it was, partly that, but it was seriously discussed within the stock exchange. Should we move out of New York? So there's an intensifying conflict, I think, over the future of the city, and a sense that there's whose voice matters, whose voice counts. This comes at the same time that New York enters into a recession, which is kind of steeper in New York in the early 70s and elsewhere in the country. The city loses hundreds of thousands of jobs over this period. This is a kind of onset of deindustrialization in New York, and also of white flight and the departure of middle-class people in the city for the surrounding suburbs. So the city also, at the same time, its revenue base is becoming strained at the very moment when there is a increased demand for social services.
How much of the recession was a function of the oil shocks that we had? I mean, I guess that doesn't come till 73, but how much of, what were the sort of the major causes of the recession in New York in particular?
Yeah, well, the oil shocks, certainly don't. They place a deep weight on, a burden on city finances, and they are problematic for the city as they are for the country as a whole. But I think it's not just that in New York. It's also a longer term, the deindustrialization of the city, which is both it's both kind of companies are leaving the city for places which have weaker unions where they can pay lower wages. Also, cheaper land is a factor. And then finally, the city government is, I think, ambivalent about the presence of manufacturing. There's a long sense that it would be better for real estate values if parts of Manhattan had less industry and were more zoned for residential and commercial development. So, there's a sense in parts of the Lindsay administration, for example, Lindsay being the mayor in the late 1960s, that it would be better to move for there to be more manufacturing, at least in the outer boroughs and not in the central, in Manhattan itself. So there is, city policy is very split about the desirability of maintaining the industrial base. So there's a kind of combination of push and pull factors which really affect the city's manufacturing base in particular. And the city, so I think that it's not just the oil shock. There's kind of a deeper structural change taking place in the nature of the city's economy at this moment. At the same time, I think that the flight to the suburbs is also very important, and
that's almost like a national ethos, right?
Yeah,
this idea of like we can go get that picket fence, and that's what we always dreamed of, and that's what everybody's attempting, wanting to do at that point. And so we have these massive budget shortfalls,
which start to emerge in the late 60s and early 70s. And New York is always dependent. This came up, recently in the fight over who would pay for universal pre-kindergarten in New York. But New York, the city government depends on Albany to extend taxing power and authority. And so in the late 60s, every year the mayor is going to Albany asking for new taxing powers People in Albany are reluctant to extend these. They do so somewhat, but rarely as much as he wants them to. And instead, what happens, the city turns to borrowing and starts to borrow more and more money to fund its operating budget, borrowing, taking out short-term loans, which carry high interest rates, and thus kind of exacerbate the fiscal problems that it's getting into.
And let me just be explicit for people who are not familiar with this dynamic in New York.
Okay.
You've got New York City, which is essentially, throwing off all of this money, tax money, from people who live here and from industries that are here, but they don't have direct access to it, at least to a large amount of it, because it's going to the state. And so a lot of that money filters throughout the state, which is far more rural and less, I guess, has less of an ability of generating income. So you've got to basically, you generate this income in New York, but then you've got to go up to Albany and deal with a whole state of a huge state of politicians who have some resentment towards New York and, and particularly probably more so then, and don't want necessarily that money to stay in New York.
Yeah, so there's a kind of fierce contest over who will actually get to keep the, in a sense, the city is generating its revenue. I mean, this is also true, another thing that's happening in the late 60s is that the war on poverty and the Great Society programs, especially the creation of Medicaid and Medicare and the expansion of welfare spending, these are all programs that are coming from the federal level. And there's kind of a big, under the Johnson administration, there's a big commitment of federal resources to anti-poverty efforts in one way or another. And that money stops growing in the early 1970s. It's kind of the beginning of the end of the war on poverty. And in a way, it leaves cities like New York in this in this bind. They've recently extended these promises to citizens. There is a kind of energized, mobilized population that has a new sense of a kind of set of social rights, and at the same time, the money from the federal government that had appeared to be available to expand this is starting to contract. So, what do you do? What happens?
Well, so then New York finds itself unable to close its budget gap. It is facing bankruptcy, and New York as a city approaches the then Ford administration, because Nixon is now exited to stage helicopter, I guess. And the Ford administration, the people who address this question are some of, in my estimation, when we talk about the villains of the 20th and still ongoing century. I mean, this is, when you contemplate the players in your story, and including Donald Trump, who also is part of this story in some, capacity, at least, if not metaphorically, I mean, literally as well.
Right.
But the fact that these people are still around and what they have done to our politics and to our country is really astonishing. And I'm talking about Alan Greenspan, Donald Rumsfeld, who else was around Ford, basically saying, and this is when Greenspan too was still, smoking cigarettes with Ayn Rand, right? I mean,
right. He's kind of fresh out of the Ayn Rand inner circle at that moment. Yes, he's the chairman of Ford's Council of Economic Advisors. And Donald Rumsfeld at this moment he's Ford's chief of staff. This is actually he will become the Secretary of Defense, but that hasn't, during the fiscal crisis moment, that hasn't happened quite yet. Actually, Dick Cheney is another kind of close advisor of Ford's, although he was less central to my particular story, but he's definitely in that mix of people. And yes, one of the things that was really shocking to me in working on this book and in working in the Ford archives was seeing just how willing Ford's inner circle was to allow New York to go bankrupt. There is a sense of that the city has brought its problems on itself, that it is to blame alone, that if New York goes bankrupt, it really won't matter very much for the rest of the national economy or for cities or states around the rest of the nation. There is a sense of that a default in New York might actually be a good thing because it would teach other cities a lesson about the dangers of social spending, and a kind of willingness to entertain what to many people appeared an unthinkable disaster. And to kind of play with this and flirt with it and to promote it almost.
Isn't it racialized too?
Quite surprising to me.
Isn't it highly racialized? I mean, the idea, and this is, I think, from around the time, it wasn't until 9/11 really that New York sort of became part of America again, I think, for a lot of people across the country. And that was because it was, John Rocker, when he came up here, that baseball player, was talking about, the freaks and the blacks and the gays going on the subway. I mean, that to me seems like the perspective that the country had. And it was like, it was almost as if the Ford administration was saying, like, if you're going to offer this many services to your black and Puerto Rican citizens, this is what you're going to get.
Right. Well, I think there's a sense of, you don't always find them expressing it quite that openly, but I think there is a sense that this is that there's a sense of kind of offering excessively generous programs to people who don't really deserve them, and that's the, and that if you do that, don't look to the federal government for help if you get into trouble. I should say another person that was kind of really driving this line in the Ford administration was William Simon, who was Ford's Treasury Secretary. And Simon actually himself came out of municipal bond circles in New York. He was a very wealthy man with a large estate in New Jersey, and he had, kind of been one of the players. And I just, the banks, the financial community as a whole in New York was happy to finance the city's expansion of debt. The rating agencies, kind of said everything was completely fine. They really were supportive of the city's borrowing right up until the moment when they wouldn't any longer. So it's a, they were very complicit, I think, in the city's taking on as much debt, as much short-term debt as it did. And yet there was, a kind of an almost, a sense that the federal government would, and Simon, as part of this, really pushing.
What was behind that? I mean, there's a great scene in that Adam Curtis film, Hypernormalization, where they show the footage of that day, where they have like whatever it was, the weekly or bi-monthly sale of New York City bonds, and nobody shows up. And they've got they cancel it at 11 in the morning or wherever it was. And they say, we're coming back at 3 p.m. And they come back at 3 p.m. and nobody shows up. I mean, what caused that decision? I mean, was there, clearly all the banks knew that each other wasn't going to show up that day.
Right.
What caused that?
Right. Well, I think that over the course of the winter of 1970, kind of early January, February, March 1975, the banks were becoming increasingly anxious about the city's finances, and there were a couple of particular events that made them concerned. There was a state agency that almost defaulted on its debt as well, the Urban Development Corporation, which had been responsible for building the Marcus Garvey projects and also the kind of a lot of the construction on Roosevelt Island. Its near bankruptcy sets off a kind of wave of fear in the city's financial community. There's also this, there was also I should say there's like a kind of changing of the guard. There are a lot of young people in their kind of 30s and 40s who play a really important role in kind of setting off alarm bells in the financial community. And so one of the banks that was part of these groups that would underwrite the city's debt, meaning take it and sell it to investors around the country. He was placed on the municipal bond desk. He wasn't usually there. Someone was sick and he came in and had to be there. So he was the one who had to sign the paperwork. And he brought in a different law firm that wasn't accustomed to handling the city deals. And the lawyers from this new firm said, is the city really going to collect all of the property taxes it says it will? can you ask for data to this effect? So he asked for data. Nobody had done this, before, and the city didn't have the data ready, so his bank pulled out of the deal. And it was like this kind of thing that sets off the alarm bells and that starts, and that leads to that meeting where
so a fluke almost.
The underwriters don't show up. I mean, or the banks, don't want to make an offer on the debt. And I think actually with that day they did, there was a big negotiation. They wound up agreeing to finance it one more time, but the writing is on the wall, and I think they become afraid that continuing to market the city's debt will, when it's not, when the city's finances are in this kind of disarray, that they'll wind up, kind of taking huge losses on it in the end, and they also might wind up in a difficult legal position because of selling it to investors around the country. And I think that's why they stop being willing to do it.
So in comes Felix Rohatyn, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and what happens next? Essentially, is it that Congress makes so much of what we're talking about you sort of see play out with Detroit on some level,
right?
But tell us what happens now, because basically, and I guess this is also what you would see with like the IMF going into some third world country and saying, we're going to give you loans to buy, hydroelectric power or dams, and you do that, and then all of a sudden you're broke, and then we're going to start taking some of your natural resources, and we're going to, that telecommunications company that your government owns, we're going to own that now, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it's interesting. It does have a certain resemblance to that kind of situation. I mean, what happens in New York is that for the rest of 1975, the city is on the edge of bankruptcy, and bankruptcy, the idea of bankruptcy, although people in the Ford administration are very blasé about it, within the city and really around the world, the idea of New York's bankruptcy sets off a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertain, people don't know what bankruptcy will mean. They don't know what services will be cut, which will be maintained. When a city goes bankrupt, it's not like a corporation going bankrupt. You can't just kind of sell off the parts of it. You actually have to continue to provide services of some sort for the people who live there. You can't just kind of shut it down. So there's a great deal of uncertainty and fear about what will happen if New York goes bankrupt. And there are a couple of, what winds up happening is that the state creates these agencies that are able to take control over New York's budget and also refinance its debt, and to kind of enforce that the city go on a march towards restructuring its finances and closing down, kind of laying off city workers, closing down hospitals, rescaling its services, and changing what it actually is providing to New Yorkers. And this is viewed at the time as very symbolic. Part of what New York has to do, as Rohatyn and others say at the time, is make it clear to the national banking community that the city is changing its ways, that it is, so things like, for example, charging tuition at CUNY, that becomes a very important demand not only because it will raise money for CUNY, but also and centrally because it will send a signal to the rest of the country that New York is no longer going to be financing these kinds of generous services, and that it is kind of reorienting itself towards business and the business community.
That's in its most obvious form. I mean, that's why this is just like clearly a political decision, but it's also gross. And
well, it is. I think there's something very undemocratic about it. I mean, I think one of the things that's remarkable of the fiscal crisis moment is that the people who are most directly affected by this transformation don't really get to have a say about it. And that was another thing that was very interesting to me working on this story, is how much popular resistance there is to the budget cutting that takes place. So there are these kind of protests spring up all around the city. There are people who occupy and sleep in, libraries that are threatened with closure. There are people who kind of have extended campaigns, writing letters to city officials and demonstrating, and also doing sit-ins at CUNY campuses that are supposed to be merged out of existence. Most famously, there's a firehouse in Williamsburg, actually, now a kind of very fancy neighborhood, but at that point a working-class Polish neighborhood, Polish and Italian, and people from this neighborhood actually occupy the local firehouse and sleep in it for 16 months, demanding that it be kept open and that their neighborhood, which was composed of many wood frame houses that were highly flammable, that did not lose the fire protection that people were relying on. So there's a kind of there's a large and diverse popular resistance to the budget cutting that is, even though that's people are not permitted to attend or be part of the actual decision-making bodies, there is this sort of, wave of protest against the changes.
And then what happens? I mean, let's talk a little bit about Trump here, because this is a good example of sort of like these huge giveaways. And I'm obligated to do this, is to remind people that, particularly in this deal that we're going to talk about with the Commodore Hotel, but also like the next 3 or 4, 5 deals, well into his 30s, when he signs that contract for this deal, it is co-signed by his dad. And none of it and none of it would have happened unless his dad co-signs it, because they're not interested in Donald Trump. They don't know him from anybody. It's Fred Trump that is guaranteeing these deals. But that said, please continue.
I didn't know that about his father, but I think, Donald Trump was at this point, he was a young man in his late 20s. And he's mostly known, as you point out, as the son of Fred Trump, who's an outer borough landlord and developer, owning tens of thousands of apartments in Brooklyn and Queens. And Donald Trump wants to get into Manhattan real estate and becomes involved in a deal around the Commodore Hotel, which is itself a nearly bankrupt hotel. It was owned by the Penn Central Railroad, which had failed in 1970, and it was near Grand Central Terminal. It had been kind of a grand old hotel from the early 20th century, and now was going to shut down. And the city was afraid of a kind of, a large abandoned building right there near Grand Central. And what Trump proposed was to work with the Hyatt Corporation and to redevelop the hotel through a somewhat complex. He would buy it and then kind of lease it, sell it to a state agency and lease it back, and thus avoid paying property taxes or pay reduced property taxes on it. According to a New York Times story from the end of last year, Trump and Hyatt, through this deal, have saved upward of $350 million in property taxes. And you might look at this situation and say, this is bizarre. Why would New York City, at a moment when it actually needs revenue, why would it enter into this arrangement where it is, kind of voluntarily saying we will forego all this revenue for years and years and years to come? But the city actually, and I think this is the other sort of important point about it, is that, a lot of people look at this and say, well, Trump is just, being a canny exploiter here and taking advantage of this prostrate city at this moment. But actually, the city government really promotes and extols the Commodore deal and says that this is its way of sending a signal to the whole business community that the attitude of the city has changed, and it's now going to be much more open to business and to development. And yes, it's kind of the first of a wave of different deals, and kind of the whole idea of using city finances to subsidize corporate development, which really kind of takes off after this point in the 1980s. So I think what's interesting is that Trump's rise here is not just a kind of matter of his own will or exertion or something. It's really something that's undertaken with the support of the city's ostensibly liberal establishment.
Right. And how much in kickbacks did Trump and his father have to give to that state agency to get them to buy it so that he could avoid paying taxes?
I don't know what I'm not sure what they had to give and what they did in terms of.
There was a lot of massaging, according at least to the late Wayne Barrett's reporting, and I think David K. Johnson has done this, and there's a couple of bios out there. And so what happens after this? So you've now got a city that has dramatically cut its services for those living in poverty, for those really the middle class. It is rolling back things like rent control over the next 30 years, I guess. And I mean, to the point where now Manhattan in particular, but just even as it spreads out, is really just seems to be like some type of safety deposit box for the fortunes of oligarchs from Russia and Latin America.
Yeah, well, I think this is. I don't think it's the city. I don't think the fiscal crisis is the only thing that happens, or is the only reason that we've kind of arrived at the place we are today, where New York is this hyper unequal space and city. But it definitely, it's one of the events that happens that helps make that turn possible, and has led to the state of affairs that we are currently in now. That said, I think another kind of interesting and maybe somewhat, counterintuitive thing about the story of the fiscal crisis is that it is interesting to me how much, there were these very deep cuts, and there also is this reorientation in city policy and the kind of the growing power of the very rich in New York. But at the same time, it is also remarkable many of the city's public institutions actually are able to survive the crisis. City University, the CUNY still exists, even though there is tuition for it now. There is the city's public transit system is still present and still vital, despite kind of a lack of investment, and even though it's gotten much more expensive to ride. Even public housing, there's some of the most, public housing endures, even in some of the wealthiest parts of the city where I'm sure developers would love to get their hands on it. There is a way in which, I think New York still embodies a public ethos or spirit that is, maybe in contest with the hyper inequality of the city, but it is still, is still there and maybe can offer some counter to it as well.
What can you, and I know it's difficult when you're dealing with like counterfactuals, but let's just say it was Johnson in office in 1973, for lack of a better substitute, and it wasn't these Ayn Randian Chicago University of Chicago types who wanted to basically whip New York into shape with the purse strings that they were holding from the federal government. Give me a sense of what alternatively could have happened in terms of could the U.S. government simply provided the liquidity that New York wanted, and would there have been a way for New York to maintain? I mean, it's true, these institutions remain, but they're fundamentally different in terms of what they do, in terms of who they serve, and to what extent they serve, and how much they impact people's quality of life. So what would the alternative vision look like?
Right. Well, I think I guess I would say that there are two things. First is that I think, yes, had the federal government been more willing to discuss different financing options for the city, the kind of high drama that surrounded New York's finances over the rest of the year could really have been minimized. Part of the kind of the intensity of the fiscal crisis came from the fact that people knew that there wasn't federal support for the city, and that bankruptcy was possible. And that was kind of part of what created this supercharged atmosphere in which it was possible to insist on all of these different kinds of cuts. So if the federal government had said, yes, we will, we're not going to let New York go bankrupt. That's our fundamental we will start from that premise, and we will work from there, and we will find some way to enable the city to refinance its debt. I think that would have actually created a very different mood and spirit and a different
leverage
kind of framework and leverage. Yeah,
different
exactly.
leverage for the city when it comes to those real estate developers. You just don't get these sweetheart deals. You'll get a decent deal,
them
but
in the same way.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and I think also, just to this is a little bit, there are a lot of ways in which changes in federal policy would have been able to affect the city's finances. So, for example, one of the intense burdens that the city had to bear was Medicaid spending, which in New York State, this was a little bit kind of policy wonky, but in New York, Medicaid is split between the federal and state governments, and then the amount that localities bear, or the amount that cities bear, differs from state to state. So New York, in New York, that split between the state government and cities is almost 50-50. So New York is bearing a full 25%, roughly, of its Medicaid and welfare bills. This is very, very high, much higher than anywhere else in the country. So kind of renegotiating these kinds of splits would also have made a big difference in the city's finances, and maybe would have enabled it to continue the kinds of policies that it was pursuing. And then finally, I think just the idea that, I think this is where my book is differs from some of the other accounts of the period. A sense that what the city was, the basic vision that New York had was not, was not foolish, was not stupid, was not kind of, at its core, just giving things away to people who don't deserve them, but that the city actually was trying to, in one way or another, promote a more equal, more just urban space and society, and to kind of address problems of racial and economic inequality that didn't originate in New York, but that that the city had to it was actually addressing and coping with those. So some sense that the federal government was also committed to that program, committed to that policy and to that agenda, and that the programs the city was financing actually mattered and were were reasonable attempt. There was nothing inherently unreasonable about them, which is what the attitude that the Ford administration and many conservatives, and in truth, over time, many Democrats as well would kind of take that position. But I think that is actually the real tragedy of the story, is that those kinds of programs actually mattered and made a difference. And in a way, although there's a lot of things that you wouldn't want to go back to in 1970s New York, it's interesting that some of the things the city did are now being talked about again. Things like free college tuition, or
UPK, which I think is a little slight derivation, but indeed,
right, they kind of executed in a different way, but some, it's more expansive now than it was in the 60s, but still, like that idea, those ideas are now coming back, and I actually think there's much, much to be learned from that moment and from that ethos and spirit. And so that's where I think, in a way, the federal government could have made an even bigger difference. And that there was actually, in a way, I think this is a story about how questions about politics and values and the question of what kind of society we want to live in, what we owe to each other, can we, as the wealthiest country in the world, can we afford libraries, music and art in our schools, to pay our public sector servants a decent wage? Or do we say those things, are not important? What matters more is tax breaks for developers and military spending.
Right.
So I think that's the kind of question that this book asks.
I hate to be a corrective, but it's almost not can we afford, it's do we want to?
Do we want?
And that's what that was answered. I also have to just add that Medicaid split that you talked about with New York was actually the subject of John Faso and Collins's two Republican congressmen from upstate New York. That's how they got the ACA repeal passed. they were bought off with this notion that the state would absorb more Medicaid payments and therefore their districts would have less of a tax burden. But that's just a sidelight.
Right.
Kim Phillips-Fein, thank you so much for your time today. The book is Fear City, New York's Fiscal Crisis and the Rise of Austerity Politics. We will link to it at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. Got to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. Important story about, how we get here. It is really, I think it's... I think I read somewhere that Naomi Klein said this was the chapter of shock doctrine that she had missed, essentially. And a very similar situation. We hold the purse strings. We're going to decide to impose austerity on you and basically extract the value that would otherwise go to a broader number of people and narrow that and just give it to guys like Donald Trump and Fed Trump. I mean, that's basically the story, right? That $360 million of tax revenue from that could have gone into services, could have paid for some people to go to college for free. And that same story plays out over the city many, 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 many times. Because remember, Congress still provided relief for the city. It's just that money ended up basically funding the tax cut for Donald Trump to have his daddy co-sign on the Commodore hotel deal.
And and that's the story across all of the structural readjustment programs and Latin America, Africa, Asia. They put up the money, and then you have to privatize public services, and you have to allow public assets to basically be co-invested in with local oligarchs and multinationals.
I mean, we saw a lot of this with Greece too, right? And it was just we keep
even,
loaning you. Yeah, it's far more severe,
more brutal,
far
Greece,
more
and
severe.
Argentina.
But the
2002.
dynamic
Yep.
is the same. All right, we're going to take a break. Speaking of dynamic, we're going to move into the dynamic fun half of the program, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, I thought you were just going to say the dynamic half. Got a full name change.
No, we're not going to go that far.
The dynamic half.
It's going to be
Where
so
I get
dynamic
dynamic
today.
with my back problems, my sleep, my shoes.
My shoes.
Oh, that's another.
I also want to say
do need to get
Your
Sneakers.
shoes are a source of controversy, but that's more with Kelly than me.
Kimberly Phillips-Fein has another book called The Invisible Hands, which is on the right wing's reaction to the New Deal. That also looks interesting.
That does look interesting.
Yeah, it goes into DuPonts. It mentions in the.
Dude, play those other poupée that I gave you. Don't play that one again. I can
I'd
tell
just
which
like
one
to
he's going
point
to do.
out if others could see the shoes, they might be a source of controversy
Well,
amongst others.
all right.
They're
Maybe
a
we'll do
source
that.
of
Maybe we'll make that.
controversy.
Maybe we'll make that a members feature. Is this the 222s?
Controversy with anyone with taste.
What? Do the 222s one. I made the trouble of downloading it and copying it. Folks, look. It's in the Dropbox, dude. Yeah, I put it in the Dropbox. I sent you a link.
You really didn't get enough sleep. So
Oh my
really bad.
God. All right, forget it. Folks,
Sorry, I took too much drugs, man. I was listening to too many high-speed audiobooks and fucking doing
To
drugs.
index the La Poupées, sorry.
Sorry, dude.
I took too much
I took
drugs.
too much drugs and listened to Nixon, man. I don't have time for your bad stalker songs covers from the 70s. Sorry, dude.
from the 60s.
From the 60s. Whatever.
All right, folks,
I didn't
listen.
get to the 60s yet.
Your support makes this show possible. I really appreciate some of our members, chipped in with because of the YouTube thing. But if you're a YouTube viewer and you watch the show on live on a regular basis, think about heading over to our Patreon. But if you are one of our members who listens to the podcast, or you listen to the freebie show, you want access to the fun half, become a member. As a bonus, we give you access to the entire fun half. If you are someone who can't afford it, but you do want to listen, send us an email at Majority Reporters. Have a little patience. I'm always perennially, weekly, bi-weekly. I'm always behind on the emails. in getting to you, but we will get there. Also, we should say, I think I can officially announce it since we screened it last Friday. Members are going to get a super bonus material. And that is going to be access to the behind the scenes. It's like 15, 20 minutes long. Behind the scenes of our first live show. And there's a lot of drama in it. I will tell you that right now. You will laugh, you will cry, you will get nervous because there's some tense moments. All that just for becoming a member today. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Also, if you purchase your items through our Amazon link at majorityreportkickback.com, we get a kickback. Also, you will find there, if you happen to be a Jet purchaser, same deal. You will notice no difference. Just head over to majorityreportkickback.com for that link. All right. 646-257-3920. See you in the Fun Hat.
She is like the doll. She says no, 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 no. And though she'd like to fall, she says no, 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 no. She says you are just a friend to me. You're no more than a friend to me. Says no, 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 no. And though she tries to fall, she says no, 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 no. I know she tries to hide from me and hopes that I won't see. Without even hearing, she says no, no, no. Without even looking, she says no, 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 no.
Sam Seder here. This is the live broadcast of the Majority Report. And as you probably have heard, there's a bit of a YouTube apocalypse that has been going on. Many news and politics channels have lost their advertising because of an algorithm that Google has implemented as a function of ads showing up on hate-filled channels. Well, we got caught up in that, and it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved. So we need your help. You've probably heard from other channels that they're asking people to donate to a Patreon site. We are asking the same so that we can operate this YouTube feed without a cost to us. I mean, we don't look at YouTube as a huge revenue maker for us, but we need your help so that we're not losing money on it. So head over to our Patreon site. Here is the URL. We need your help. Just a couple of bucks, $2-3 a month would really help us out. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Fun half. Ladies and gentlemen. So fun. So half. Last night, after the Washington Post broke the story that Donald Trump had revealed top secret information to the Russian ambassador, and also Lavrov is the minister of foreign minister, but also I think Kislyak was there as well,
ambassador to Washington,
right?
Yeah.
And
Ray,
so
you might want to put that one in quotation
the report
marks.
comes
Yes.
out in the Washington Post. It is sourced by former and current intelligence officials. it seems that from that initial story that the Washington Post became aware of it because representatives, I think, of the intelligence community went and reported it to the CIA so that they could report it to other intelligence agencies and perhaps warn the country that provided us this material. Subsequently, it was reported by Reuters and then by the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, all adding some small details to the story. National Security head advisor, McMaster, comes out at about 7:10, at 7:08, I guess, last night, to quash this story. None of this happened, ladies and gentlemen, according to McMaster. Remember, he's a general.
There's nothing that the president takes more seriously than the security of the American people. The story that came out tonight, as reported, is false. The president and the foreign minister reviewed a range of common threats to our two countries, including threats to civil aviation. At no time were intelligence sources or methods discussed. And the president did not disclose any military operations that were not already publicly known. Two other senior officials who were present, including the Secretary of State, remember the meeting the same way and have said so. Their on-the-record accounts should outweigh those of anonymous sources. And I was in the room. It didn't happen. Thanks, everybody.
It didn't happen. In other words, what didn't happen was sources or methods were not discussed, nor were ongoing military operations. But I guess what turns out is that, like, there's some information that you can reveal that actually gives you a good sense of what the sources or methods were.
It's not inappropriate when the president does it.
Well, the truth is, it is not illegal when the president does it. The president has the ability to declassify anything, and apparently he decided in that moment, because it was McMaster's today, conceded we didn't necessarily have a meeting about what he would say. I should also say, in the interim between McMaster last night and McMaster today, that Donald Trump tweeted out, "I can do that," and I did do it, and I was just discussing stuff with them to try and show trust. Apparently, he had watched this on an episode of Survivor, where telling somebody you had the immunity idol actually creates a stronger alliance, and so therefore that. But
Donald, wear blindfold and fall back into our arms. It is trust-building team exercise from USA middle management culture. You do that, then you hand us secret briefing, maybe?
And one
By
thing,
the way, your daughter is tremendous piece of ass.
10.
Total 10.
Total
Or maybe
10.
off of scale.
But wait a second. So today, McMaster's comes out, and he's asked directly, specifically, what about the city that, because the Washington Post withheld information in their report because it was too sensitive. And McMaster was asked, what about the city that the president said it was taken from? Because obviously, if it's a specific city, it may, particularly to professionals, provide them with a lot of clues as to who and how this information was obtained. And McMaster said the city was no big deal. Everybody knows that city, without naming the city that everybody knows. So it's another crap storm. And, I mean, look, I don't know how sensitive the material was. I wasn't there. Do I believe McMaster? No. Do I believe Donald Trump? No. Do I believe unnamed sources? Not particularly. I mean, there is clearly, and do we have that clip where we were talking about the city?
This is him saying Trump wasn't aware of where the information came from.
So here's Donald Trump. Obviously, he was told where the information came from, but he just wasn't aware of it because he didn't listen. But he felt comfortable enough in it to just tell Lavrov. Because, hey, I'm the president.
Well, I mean, there are no sensitivities in terms of me or anybody who's been with the president in many of these engagements. He shares information in a way that is wholly appropriate. And I should just make maybe the statement here that the president wasn't even aware, of where this information came from. He wasn't briefed on the source and method of the information either. So,
oh, really? Oh, really? Oh, really? I just want to remind you folks that when we were talking about bombing Syria, I sat on a sound studio with probably 3 or 4 former foreign policy apparatchiks and commentators and Brookings Institute who were all like, well, yeah, Trump may be an idiot, but at least the generals, you can trust the McMasters. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I mean, aside from maybe that the guy's just bald-faced lying to us, he clearly cannot control the president. And you don't want a situation where, you've empowered the generals and the national security advisors and the spies to not provide information to the president. Like, hey, you guys, you decide whether or not the president is not, whether or not the information warrants being heard by the president, whether or not you can trust him to not just accidentally blurt it out because he's trying to impress his new girlfriend or boyfriend or whomever.
What? Boyfriend? It's a total lie.
Or whatever. Like, look, listen, I appreciate this dynamic, okay? I have an 11-year-old daughter. It is very difficult in middle school to make friends. Sometimes you go into a situation, you say things that you want to impress the other friends and whatnot. I understand that. But, he just has to sit down and learn that people are going to like him just because he's president. Not because he tells them state secrets.
All right,
okay.
People like me because I'm president. People like me because I'm president. Hello, Foreign Minister of Russia. Look, these things happening in Syria. I can't do it. I got this big. There's a convoy. It's a Mitt Romney thing too.
Do you want to see? Do you want to see the nuclear codes? You want to see the nuclear codes?
Want to see the codes?
You can just look at them.
Some of them are even pointing at you. Unbelievable.
Quickly.
It's crazy.
Super quickly.
Super quickly.
Has any president ever taken you into the special ops room where we control the bomb?
You know what would be unbelievable?
Why don't you? It's right behind this door. It's
is
secret.
If you played with the button yourself and you were pretending to bomb your own country. Because that's where they're pointed at. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. The Russian foreign minister is playing with the button.
Sit in the captain's
he's
chair.
From Moscow.
Sit in the captain's chair.
Yeah. You want to take the wheel a little while?
Also, that story.
When you go visit the British, they don't let you do this, do they? Only me.
Theresa May is a real stickler.
I'm your best friend.
I asked to touch her nuke. She said no. She's a real stickler. Theresa May, real stickler. Total stickler.
Did you, and the Israeli story is back again, that was reported several months ago, that as Israeli officials were saying, like, don't share intelligence.
Right, in January.
As a matter of course.
Well, not Israeli officials. That our spies, our spies intelligence officials were telling Israel, don't give us the information. Because then we're obligated to give it to the president, and we don't know where that ends up. But again, it's like a perfect example, like all this time they accused me of giving information to the Russians, and they thought I did it on purpose.
No one ever considered the fact that I was a stupid, impulsive narcissist with untreated syphilis. They wanted to make it something big. When in reality, I'm just indulgent, sociopathic, insecure, and mentally ill.
It's just the way that people project onto you. It's really sad.
It's sad. These Democrats, they run around with all their little clever West Wing plots, and they watch Scandal with Kerry Washington, who is a 6, but a 10.5 on a black scale. And then they pretend and they say...
Okay. So here is, should we play this Greg Miller or no? We just skip it, you think? Yeah, I got the point. All right, well, here is Joe Scarborough this morning, who, with all due respect to Joe Scarborough, like it was announced yesterday that, well, first of all, MSNBC apparently has hired like 12, I don't know, conservative commentators.
Baseball team's worth.
I don't know. I don't see them at the commissary, but and there is talk that they're not going to renew Lawrence O'Donnell, who is literally getting the best ratings that the network has seen, short of Rachel Maddow's, maybe in its history. Maybe in its history. And it's unclear whether or not they will or won't, but it certainly looks like they won't. And so as the network pivots, the one thing that I think you have to give Joe Scarborough credit for is that this guy's ability to pivot. It's almost not even pivot, it's swivel.
It's like Karl Malone pivot.
So here he is now, at long last, although we know what will happen. I mean, how many times did we talk about Joe Scarborough saying, like, we are done with this guy? Well, Mr. President, welcome back. I'm glad you said that thing that allowed you to come back on our show, that type of thing. But here he is.
I started seeing yesterday for the first time these conservative hucksters who make money going to a niche audience being called out not for supporting Donald Trump, but for their anti-Trumpism. It's not enough to just attack Donald Trump's enemies. It's not enough to just attack the press. When you have the commander-in-chief revealing the most sensitive secrets to one of our greatest rivals, if not outright enemy, who opposes our interests across the globe, in the Middle East and across the globe.
Look at these pictures.
It is not enough for Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and conservative talk show hosts to simply attack the lamestream media, or simply attack Nancy Pelosi. Americans will not buy that. That's a cowardly act, and it's intended to hold on to as much of the audience that they can hold on to without embracing Trump.
So welcome to the pool. Although I gotta say, like, look at those pictures. Horrific. Look at him smiling. I mean, God save me, but I certainly don't want to be put in a position of defending the fact that Donald Trump takes a picture with a Russian guy. It's just
even when they're right, they're wrong.
It's the level of insanity now is just completely off the charts. I think I would put just sort of complete spontaneous combustion very high at the list of things that could happen. And when I say what, I'm talking like all of us. I think we all just might burst into flames soon.
Everyone's on my wavelength now. You enjoying this? Welcome to the world of collective mental illness. I think you're going to love it. I think you might enjoy it.
Speaking of collective mental illness, so, and this is from March? This is from March 12th? Is that right? May 12th, I think. Now, what's really important, folks, is that you see the humanity that exists within the Trump family. It's not just, they're not just a bunch of like syphilitic riddled old men, or they're not just people who want to cut Medicaid by 1/4 of its entire budget and throw children and elderly and people living in poverty and people with brain tumors. And it's not just that they want to make your health insurance so crappy that it will again bring half of the bankruptcies back because of a function of medical expenses. They're also people. And what better way to know that they're people than to take a look in their room? Let's let Ivanka show us around her New York City apartment and what's really important to her.
Ivanka recently took us inside her New York apartment for a glimpse of how she lives outside the boardroom. Here are things that she says she can't live without.
Pause it. Wait a second. Is this really from now? This has got to be old. The boardroom? What boardroom? This has got to be old. When Oprah having Ivanka on now? 3 days ago? What? What boardroom? She's not supposed to be in any boardroom. This is crazy. I wonder if Oprah was being held at gunpoint when she did that intro. But here it is.
In this particular room, there's a wealth of things that I cannot live without, starting with the backgammon table. This is actually sort of game central over here. I have Monopoly, I have Cranium.
Pause it. Hold on. Can we go back to that backgammon table? Look at that. That's weird. They just look at it. It's like we casually put the cards right there. Where do they play the cards? Where do they put that table? I don't buy any of it. I don't think anybody's ever played that game. There's no way. I doubt it. Where's the other die? Why is there only one die there? No. Forget it. She could totally live without that, but I want to seem human. Go ahead.
This is actually sort of game central over here.
Yeah,
I
it's
have
game
Monopoly,
central.
I have Cranium, I have Clue. Well, I'm very competitive.
Whoa. That Clue is still in the box. Still in the box. It's such a lie. So is it the Monopoly. They all are. They're all the Twisters also in the box.
They got the packaging on
They're
it.
all still shrink wrapped. They bought it for this. They bought it for this. We got all the games here. Look it, I purchased them. We just had. Now, hold on for 1 second. Can we also just throw some books up there so it doesn't look like it's too done? I mean, this is so freaking manufactured. Every single one of those games are still in the shrink wrap. Continue.
Clue. Well, I'm very competitive. So even these, silly childhood games, I take rather seriously.
Pause it.
Monkeys.
You know what? I take them so seriously, I don't even take them out of the box. I'm so competitive, I don't want them worn out in any
Investments.
fashion.
You collect them and sell them 20 years later.
Yeah, here we go.
Rather seriously. Monkeys, somehow, I've found that I have quite a fascination with. I have all these simian things all over my apartment. I love this drunk monkey. I carted a garbage can back from somewhere in the south of France as a carry-on, and I'm very happy I did it.
Pause it. I will be willing to wager anything that she did not cart that back. And
I carted it.
I like how it's like, you can see my whole apartment, but let's just stay in this one room.
Photo albums, and then, of course, photos. Very important. I think they were probably the one thing I couldn't live without. I have a bunch of these all over my apartment, so they're a lot of fun, good memories. Digital recorder. Can't
Digital
live without
video
it.
recorder.
Now I can actually watch the television that I want to watch.
Pause it. Well, yeah, we just got this DVR thing. It's really great. You know what I noticed about this? And look, I'm not going to be in a position to judge. I don't want to judge because I can't stand my kids. But all of the important things in her life are all in this like tiny, tiny room. She lives on like 4 floors of a New York City apartment. It's all in this tiny, tiny room, and none of them have to do with the children. This is just the important thing that I look at. My box of games, like, because the games up there are imply like she plays them with the children, right? Of course, they're not even open. Oh my God. Oprah, I feel like Oprah should, I want to hear the apology from Oprah for that segment. Are you kidding me?
Oprah is currently embroiled in a very recent scandal.
Really?
Yes, because she put up a photo of herself with a woman who was pushing her dog in a stroller, as we all know is incredibly normal around here, and called it, like for Mother's Day, it's like you're a mother of a pet, and people are like, that's not being a mother.
Oh my God.
It's really a firestorm.
Yes, that's not being a mother. How dare you, Oprah? But I like the piece where you had where you pretended like Ivanka Trump was a human being and allowed her to show off her still in the packages games.
What do you think shooting that was like from like the behind the scenes standpoint? Because they obviously let like a camera guy in the room.
That camera guy should be given a medal. Because that camera guy definitely said, no, the wrapping won't show up. The lighting is such in here. You won't see it.
Don't worry about it.
Let's just shoot. It's great. It's great. No, it looks really good. And it really does make you look like you're having fun and with kids things. You're a little bit
It looks
frivolous.
like you're doing exactly what you say.
I want to give that cameraman or woman. I want to give that camera person a frickin' medal.
When I'm asked what I couldn't live without, the first thought I go to is the backgammon.
Oh, and this DVR. I finally have the ability to watch television. Can you imagine? Here I am, a billionaire, and we did not have television recording technology that has been available for over a decade. We didn't have it here yet. No, now I can finally watch television, Fox News.
It does remind me, though, obviously in her case it's ridiculous, but there was this really bizarre article that came out when Mitt Romney was running for president about how he was, like, other than, the car elevator, obviously, but with, like, day-to-day consumer goods, he had, like, the spending habits of somebody on, like, a, lower middle-class budget. And he would, like, brag about how, I don't know apps that, cost anything, or on my iPad. And the whole point of the article, which was kind of great, was, like, he was essentially a walking contradiction of trickle-down economics, which is, like, basically, like, yes, he has a lot of money, and he hoards it in this bizarre, obsessively cheap fashion, and then occasionally indulges in, like, hyper extravagance, which has nothing to do with the rest of the economy. But, like, the day in and day out of, like, I'll buy more cereal, I'll buy more apps. He's just like, oh, yeah, all the cereals, like, Caldor brand cereal, and I get, like, detergent from, like, Sam's, like, living, like, almost on, like, a 40, grand a year budget.
I'm sorry.
Funny.
I'm not convinced that it wasn't like, okay, are we done now? Can we go back to the way that we really live?
I think he is so bizarre that I actually do find it plausible that he would have, like, private jet, car elevators, and then be like, everything else could be Sam's Club.
All right,
buy it.
We haven't heard much from Mike Huckabee as of late. His daughter has now moved into sort of his little media slot. But here is Mike Huckabee. He's still... What's amazing is that, like, when was the last time... when was the last time you thought about marriage equality? About gay people getting married, unless you knew, I guess, a couple that got married. But it seems like this was settled a decade ago. I feel like that. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're still wrestling with it.
I'm not wrestling with it. The last
That's
time
okay, Kelly.
I thought about it was in, I don't know, my daily fear spirals of things that we're going to lose
well,
in a Trump presidency.
Fair enough. Well, it's not just a Trump presidency; it's Republican control of all of it.
Yes, it's a Republican Congress. That Trump is really.
Apparently, Mike Huckabee is also thinking the same thing, but he's thinking of it as this is one of the positives. Here he is talking with the religious right, sort of a historian, but sort of like a fictional historian.
Not exactly a historical fiction writer either.
David Barton, in a new DVD called The Constitutional Christian.
We should do a showing of this, actually, maybe.
Oh, that might be a good bonus thing. Oh, that's a good idea. Make a list. Kelly, make a list of one. Go. Here is Mike Huckabee explaining what is so wrong about marriage equality.
What we now have is not a nation of law. We have a nation that is governed by 5 unelected, black-robed lawyers.
Pause it
Think
for one
about
second. We should tell you, we did not add this music. The music was already in there to heighten the drama of these black-robed...
Yeah, I didn't also add the pause after with the
really bizarre pause.
He couldn't remember. Are we supposed to say robed or black-robed? I can't remember. Go ahead.
Of law. We have a nation that is governed by 5 unelected, black-robed lawyers. Think about this. This wasn't even a unanimous decision of the court. It was a sharply divided decision. 5 unelected lawyers invalidated the votes of tens of millions of Americans, 34 states, and the will of many people.
Pause it.
And
Now, I should just be clear here. He's not talking about the Bush v. Gore decision that brought George Bush to the presidency. He's talking about the Obergefell decision, which allowed for marriage equality.
Single moment decided that they were going to redefine marriage. Now, what's most remarkable, and I'll try to keep this short, but I'm passionate about this because it goes to the heart of why our country's falling apart. It's not about same-sex marriage so much as it is the process. By their circumventing the process of this being decided by the people, they decided that it was what they should have done and what the people should have thought. What the real sin of this was that there's not a word in the Constitution about marriage.
Pause it for 1 second. I should also make it clear he's not talking about the absolving of slavery, too. He's not talking about that. Go ahead.
The Constitution of the United States has not one word that defines marriage, says what marriage is or should be. And the 10th Amendment says if it's not in the Constitution, it's left to the states. So for all of us who believe that the 10th Amendment was that one last fence that kept the federal government from getting too big for its britches, suddenly the federal government busted out of its britches in a huge way and said, there is no 10th Amendment. We can do whatever we doggone well want to. And we don't have to have language. We don't have to have words. We don't have to have boundaries or parameters. We are God. Now, I know that they didn't say it in that term, but Tom, what they basically said in June of 2015 was, we are God. We're not just the God of law in the country. We are God Almighty, and we have redefined marriage according to the wishes of 5 unelected lawyers.
So it's not clear if he is chastising the other 4 for not joining with the 5 in that decision. But I'll tell you something. There is nothing more disturbing than when America pops out of its britches. It's just
I remember
burst out of its
Kennedy's
britches.
concurrence where he agreed with the decision but said he did not think that they were God incarnated in black robes.
I busted out of britches like a bitch.
So there it
When
is,
you're in
folks.
America,
It's
they let you
not
do it.
that he has a problem with marriage equality. It's that he has a problem with the process. You didn't let some states retain their bigotry. Now, of course, there's a million things that are not written about in the Constitution, right? Like, I don't know, union agency fees or abortion, or there's plenty of things that are not mentioned in it. The idea that we would take principles of the Constitution, due process, equal protection, whatever it is, and apply it to different scenarios is the least controversial thing that one could ever imagine. Unless, of course, he really actually had a problem with the
It's not
underlying
what
thing.
Glenn Beck says.
It is not what Glenn Beck says. Lastly, and then we'll go to the phones and the IMs. This is a little bit I mean, this guy is... Our president is insane. And one of the ways that this manifests it is a total lack of situational awareness and a complete lack of empathy with other human beings so as to not understand the implications of his actions. Here is President Trump at the National Peace Officers Memorial Service on the Capitol steps on Monday. He wasn't going to travel too far for this. And in the front row of the audience was a 6-year-old boy, Micah Glasser. He's the son of a Phoenix police officer, Brian Glasser, who was killed in the line of duty last year. And so the kid is going to this, basically memorial for his dad. And Donald Trump tries to make it a little bit more interesting for him.
And just to show you, by the way, how much I love our police, I said, oh, I'm going to need a hat because it's so windy today. I said, when I get out of here, there's no way I'm going to put on this hat. So we'll leave off the hat. And this is for you, Micah. That's for our beautiful Micah down there.
Yeah, take a hat. Sorry about your dad. Just a weird, just like not.
It's gravitas.
Yeah.
He's just off. I know that's such an obvious statement.
It's not
but
a
it is
political
unnerving.
critique.
It's like the
just
Purple Heart thing where the guy gave me, he's like, oh, thanks for that. I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly.
Appreciate it.
I feel like I earned it. I sacrificed a lot.
Though, to be fair, we did play a clip last year of George W. Bush basically dancing at that Dallas policeman's funeral. So
Yeah, but he was drunk.
Yeah, but he was wasted, yeah.
I'm back on the bottle. On the road again.
No reason not to have fun. Life's for living.
No, that is actually a lot less like if somebody's just a drunk. I mean, it's not to say it can't be problematic and it's a serious problem, but versus someone who is like,
I don't know. To be fair, you don't know if he's not some type of like Adderall addict or.
oh, I think it's a diet pill. And I also think he has syphilis. And I think he's an undiagnosed
George
narcissistic
W.
sociopath.
Bush was doing stuff like that when he was in office, it would have been more concerning than it is when he's
It's pretty close. We talked about that. It was definitely moments. Ivana Tinkle. I would like to remind all the people who are upset over Hillary bashing and Democratic Party bashing that the political structure of the country is out of balance with the world. The Democratic Party is Republican, and the Republican Party is extreme authoritarian. The only center-left or left candidate is Bernie's policies. The world gets it, but we're okay with being duped. No, we're not. Nuclear Negroid, are you Hayes Homo still above the Russia story? Because it looks to me like it'll be the fulcrum with which we pry this lump out of office. Go on, be a Rachel. I mean, I definitely see the value of this story from a political standpoint, but I would like there to be something else that we can achieve beyond it. All right. You know what? Someone just suggested Random Rush, and I think that's a great idea. I'm curious.
Was chosen by Trump to be the
Okay. Yeah. It's time for Random Rush. You know what that means? I listen to Rush Limbaugh for 60 seconds, and then I respond in 90. And it is now 1:38 p.m. Eastern Coast time.
and could not be compromised. The never-Trumpers and the establishmentarians figured that it was this man who would keep Donald Trump from firing nuclear weapons at Jeff Bezos. It was H.R. McMaster who was going to bring a solid respectability and a responsibility to an otherwise out-of-control, unique, infantile, inexperienced president and administration. So this man with enviable integrity and respect, this man H.R. McMaster, who everybody in the drive-by media and everybody in the Washington establishment loves and respects and thinks is solid, goes out and tells them last night and today that what was in the Washington Post is false, and they've chosen not to believe him. It is not because of Trump that they want transcripts. They are essentially saying to H.R. McMaster, we don't believe you. This is not about Trump. This request for transcripts, this is about McMaster. McMaster's out there in two different press briefings, last night and today, telling them, you guys got it all wrong. There was nothing whatsoever going on in that room, even close.
All right, I gave Rush 90 seconds or almost, and I will take 90 seconds First of all, what Russia is trying to do is trying to make it about the hypocrisy and the Donald Trump hysteria and the derangement syndrome. So much so that even though they love McMaster's, they're not going to believe McMaster's. Part of that is because McMaster's said yesterday none of it happened, and then his boss the next morning said it did happen, but it was okay. Part of the reason why people don't believe McMaster's is because his own boss completely threw him under the bus and said it did happen. And then we have reporting not just from the Washington Post, but separate reporting from the Times, Reuters, Wall Street Journal. So it happened. Why doesn't Rush Limbaugh just accept the fact that it's perfectly legal for the president to do that? It's just that some people would disagree with the value of doing it because he's not going to argue on the merits of it. He can't. And I would imagine his next segment is going to be about what some Hollywood person said, or about how, you can't say Happy Easter in the middle of the summer anymore, or whatever it is, because they've completely run out of things to talk about. And that's my time.
It's good to be speaking with you, Rachel, and I know you will try to direct the conversation to a 2/3 cut in Medicare and a new proposal from a congressman from Oklahoma that Hispanic children should be shot in public squares and whoever survives can get a one-way ticket to Honduras. But I would like to discuss something more substantive, if I may. Did you realize that there are students at Oberlin College in Ohio who no longer want local children to do an Easter egg hunt? Now, the hunt is still happening. It was about 2 students, and the petition was a joke. But this is a war on Christianity, freedom of speech, and Easter. And you're talking about Medicaid. Of course you would, Rachel. Socialist lesbian.
Let me, you make a joke like that, but let me just tell you this. Dave Rubin, virtually all his tweets yesterday were about what was going on campuses. The last one, literally in the heart of all this stuff flying around on Twitter, he is responding to a tweet and doesn't just respond to it. He quote tweets it, right? Because this is what you do. This is the thing. You quote tweet it if you really want to make your statement, as opposed to just responding to somebody. And somebody tweeted at him, was watching Spider-Man. There's a joke where he asks the wrestler if he has a husband. No way the left would allow that today, Rubin report. And Rubin put out, Peter Parker was obviously a homophobe. And if you disagree with me, you're obviously an arachnophobe.
That guy is, as I always say, though, he the one distinguishing feature of Dave Rubin is his perfect meeting of the middle of being a pretty genuinely stupid guy and also unbelievably cynical.
You will appreciate what I wrote back to him was capturing the pulse of the nation, I quote tweeted, and then ... hashtag core brand proposition.
Did you not at me on that?
I know I should.
And that, and every time he tweets, at least a couple times a week, people tweet at him and suggest like, "Hey, you want to talk to a smart liberal? You could talk to Sam or Michael." And
nothing.
Just
Radio,
no interest in a
silent.
Free and open exchange.
It's
of ideas.
really, I started to think that you're the only real liberal because he's not the only real liberal anymore.
If you don't quote tweet it, then you can't pin it. So he might just be keeping his options open for what his most clever tweet is in his mind.
Good point.
Very generous. I also should say that someone pointed out to me that I was the subject of a recent video by someone's name who has a YouTube channel called Sam's Bulldog, as in Sam Harris's bulldog.
Oh, really? Nice.
I don't think
that guy. I wanted that to be my
I just
identity.
gave that guy more views than he could have ever even contemplated.
Wait, what did the video say about you? I feel like this is the most famous I've ever heard you be. This is.
I hope not. It's like about 30 hits.
Breakout.
Thank you. No, I think it said something. It was actually pretty shocking. It was apparently I was taking Sam Harris out of context. And that something about not accurately representing Sam Harris's ideas. It was very different than literally the thousands of other videos and tweets I've heard
So
before.
I regret to.
There's a lot of like machinations involved with taking him out of context.
I know. It's really incredible.
I have to issue a correction. That Ivanka clip was from 2007. Oprah Whitney Network just uploaded on May 12th, though, and they don't mention that. It just says Ivanka Trump invites viewers into her posh New York apartment to see some things she can't live without.
Well, you're going to have to go
Son
on
of a
camera with
bitch.
it. We're going to have to put a
Stonard.
we're going to have to put a correction on there.
Stonard.
Correction. That video was from 2007. Well,
It was hard to tell because I was saying I
Here's
was
the
going to
good
say that it has to be at least a year old because she has baby weight on, but that also makes sense.
here's the
because she
nice
had a
thing
kid
about
back
it.
then.
It's nice to know that she was a fake human being even before her dad was running for office.
Even scarier, almost.
I wonder if those packages are still in there. They just haven't removed it.
If I'm ever a novelist, I'm going to use that detail of like the packaging was still on the board games as like a chilling reveal.
Gary Busey, when I was in Gary Busey's house and he's telling us like, I'm trying to get him to focus on whatever the episode is. He's like, "Are you aware of the Illuminati?" I mean, I've heard of them. Yeah. All right. I have some videos. You guys see. I'll tell you right now. So he goes over, opens up his cabinet. He's like, "Take a look at this." They're all in the shrink wrap. If we were even to take these out of the wrappers, they would probably be on top of us so quickly. That's why we can't actually take them out of the box.
What were they though?
They were all like, David Icke, lizard
Awesome.
changelings, and
Reptilians.
Why don't you
yeah,
still hang
Alex
out with
Jones
him?
and stuff like that.
He sounds pretty fun.
How many? You did this for one season?
There was only one season. It was probably, I don't know how long it was. It was the longest 6 to 8 months of my life. Like literally, this was in 2004, and I was more gray then than I am now.
I feel like it's such a gold mine. Like,
I was staying at a place in West Hollywood, and it was like infested with ants. And I would go to sleep.
big deal. I'm
Well, no,
staying in a
I
place
understand,
in where
but
I live, and it has ants now too.
But my whole life was going to Gary Busey and then trying to keep these ants out of my bed at night. And it was just like, and I was listening to Coast. I didn't have a television. It was just one of the darkest periods of my life. I would wake up in the morning with a crease in my forehead, like, because I was obviously going to bed like this, like, sleeping like this the whole way. It was really a tough time.
I feel like that way it doesn't sound. It sounds better than my life.
I mean,
Ants are really easy to get rid
Gary,
of. Maybe not in
if
California. not in
Gary,
California.
if you showed up and
stop.
had to wrangle me every day, and my mood was radically different because of the drug I was taking, and I was to tell you that we can't shoot over there because there's Mexicans and they're coming to get me, and
The Mexicans
I would
didn't like
actually
Gary?
enjoy that more.
Why did the
it would,
Mexi-
it
why
would
did the
make me
Mexicans
feel.
not
that
like-
can be arranged.
Why did the Mexicans
would
not
make
like
me-
Gary?
It would make me feel like
I'm
I
curious
was
about that.
in
What did he do to
control.
piss them off?
Panhandlers, they're coming after me.
So wait, so I like how you make him sound like the most plutocratic, like dickhead guy in front of Penn Station sniffing glue person possible. It's like as if you had someone that would accost
I
you
may
on the
be
street
understating. I
to
may be
tell you
understating.
you're
I may be
understating it.
understating.
He's just
They're like the
making him
mood's
sound
fake and
incredibly
Mexicans
erratic.
are poor.
He's just making him sound erratic and like someone
no.
who's doing a bunch of different drugs.
But he was also
Worse than erratic.
a huge bully, and we were all at his whim.
Yeah, I feel like if I came in here and you were just, and I was the
Every
one,
single day.
and no, you're right.
Yeah.
But
Stop
still,
bullying me,
on a
Mr.
certain level,
Busey.
it would help my self-esteem if I was the one making
Yeah,
things.
I'm sure the first 3 days that would go
Right,
well for you.
yeah.
Stop bullying me, Mr. Busey.
Epish.
I'm the director.
How much is the calculation of austerity tied to the Dobbs-Sen strategy stagnant for real wages? Sen's work on choice of technique complemented that of Maurice Dobb. In a developing country, The Dobbs-Sen strategy relied on maximizing the investable surpluses, maintaining constant real wages, and using the entire increase in labor productivity due to technological change to raise the rate of accumulation. In other words, workers were expected no improvement in their standard of living despite having become more productive. Edgewater Joe, what's the over-under on how many Trump's gaffes leading to a new international crisis on his first foreign trip? I'll re-up my membership early if you make Luna's version of La Poupée the one and only standard bearer for the fun half bumper. It's by far the best. That was the original. Hal Rager, so many virgins, so little time. I love Sarah Palin. The problem in New York City back then was the lack of commitment to capitalist profits. Wells Fargo and United Stock has risen since their scandals. Willingness to defraud and beat people's asses is apparently a great signifier to investors. You guys have attacked Trump relentlessly, so it's progressive now to attack 70-year-olds with dementia. Kike the Cuck, can you put a link to the parallel universe version of the Majority Report that Joseph Ballin listens to PT to on the blog? It sure sounds more interesting than listening to an aging lesbian bitch about the Social Security Trust Fund's looming insolvency. Barheim just became a YouTube Patreon. Thanks. Because listening to Sam wax poetic about apples, Michael doing his impressions, and Kelly talk about her puppies is a million times better than anything I could hear on Morning Joe. Render unto Squeezer. Saw your Never Trump tweets addressing your GOP friends. Wish I could have liked it twice. Do you have any advice for how to maintain relationships with friends and families who happen to be conservatives and right-wingers? I don't know. Kyle called me out for the friends thing and called it a straw man, and I think that's probably true. So, a friend of mine the other day starts ranting about a statistic that states most U.S. families couldn't cope with an unexpected expense of $2,000. Says if you don't have $2,000 in savings, but you have a car and a cell phone, you deserve whatever happens to you. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because without a car and a cell phone, depending on where you live, your ability to maintain a job would be very, very hampered.
Lose the avocado toast.
I point out me and my wife both have cars and cell phones, without which we can't do our jobs. Our savings are wiped out every 6 months by an unexpected expense. So if my son got hit by a car, we couldn't afford the deductible, we just deserve it. He says, oh man, I didn't realize you guys were so bad with money. And then started lecturing us on how much we pay in rent and giving unsolicited financial advice. He tried to show me a Ben Shapiro video. When I pointed out he was being a dick, he said, well, you're the one who made it personal. It's not my fault commies can't balance a checkbook. I've known this guy for over a decade. How on the F do you deal with people like this on a human level, or is it even worth it?
I wouldn't. Sounds like a terrible person.
I'm not sure what the value is of that friendship. You would have to measure that out, but it sounds like, wow. When did his really disturbing divorce take place? Tom
he does,
Fruta.
in fact, sound like
This is Tom Taylor running against Representative Mia Love in Utah. I must be doing something right because she just blocked me on Twitter. Huh. MR member, story of screaming overheard in cabinet room between Spicer, Bannon, and Sanders. Story says it was about Trump spilling intelligence to Russia, but I have on a good authority it was over the last cheeseburger. Chris Lopaco, I canceled my membership with another liberal media organization because I couldn't stand listening to some of their comedians and or reporters apologize for Russia or blame Obama and Hillary for everything that happened on the headlines. I can't even remember the 3-letter name of that organization because they're so dead to me. I'm willing to sponsor a $10 a month Majority Report subscription to anyone who can't afford it. Wow. Lepaco, my parents used to make me shrink wrap all my toys after use. When I didn't, they burned the bottom of my feet with cigarettes. That's why I'm so competitive. Cuddle monkeys. Guys, why are you always bringing up Tulsi Gabbard all the time? I'm so sick of the reducto ad hominems against Tulsi. I respond to your points against her with 2 things: argumentum ad absurdum and refuto ad infinitum. Number 1, she's a woman. So there. 2, she supported Bernie in the primary. Boom, roasted. Love all the Jimmies. Film Fest guy. I'm surprised the talking points of today aren't, how did Hillary know when Trump released the classified info to the Russians, and when did she know it? Amicavoy, I think Sunday's morning shows need to take a page from sports broadcasts and put up stats for their guests. John McCain nominated Sarah Palin as VP, supported every dumb war for the past 40 years, involved in the Keating 5 savings and loan scandal. Bernie Carrick, former police commissioner, noted convicted felon. Darrell Issa, used car thief, arsonist, fraudster, made a fortune selling shitty car alarms. Calling from a 192 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 192?
Hello.
Hello?
This
What?
is Dr. Sebastian Walker.
Okay. You got to bring the heat.
Been excoriating my PhD.
Okay.
So I had some of my old chaps from 6th year in to look into Michael Brooks' academic history.
Yes. What did you find?
It seems that he went to the Middle Eastern Technical Institute located in the capital of Islamofascism.
Where is that?
In Ankara, Erdoganistan.
So you're suggesting he went to some...
There he majored in beta cuckery with a focus on Islamofascist apologism.
Wait, is that a dual major? Or is that...
It's actually a joint degree, yeah.
Then he went on and he worked as a senior analyst at the Iranian American Institute.
Yes?
I have to say, Michael, this all brings into question your loyalty to America. Okay, sorry, I couldn't sustain the accent anymore.
I was waiting. Like you were almost like you almost
You
choking.
did like actual art, like you went
good
on my
research.
LinkedIn profile or something.
Yeah, I did actually. I looked at your LinkedIn profile. One quick point, guys, before I hop off and let you guys move on. About Tulsi Gabbard. I'm sorry to bring it up again, but I'm looking at her open secrets. So, she takes money from Boeing, which is a shitload of weapons manufacturing, and Lockheed Martin. So, all the progressives who are in love with this lady just understand that the same thing that you would say about Hillary Clinton being evil because of the people she takes money from Wall Street, she takes money directly from the military-industrial complex. So why would she be any different?
Well said. Appreciate the call.
That's true.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.
Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, Sam from San Antonio. Good afternoon, Sam.
Hi, John. How are you?
Yeah. I'm okay. The easiest way for Trump to crush the FBI investigation is to name one of the most corrupt Republican politicians around, John Cornyn, as the director of the FBI. I definitely don't want that to happen.
He
but
bowed
one
out.
good thing. He bowed out?
Yeah,
when did that happen?
just recently in the past like 15 minutes. I'll confirm
15
that.
minutes, okay.
Well done. All you
Okay,
got to do
well,
is call this show, John, and boom, whatever you need, we do it.
Okay, well, I looked it up less than an hour ago, but okay. So here's my second point. Then, Matthew Iglesias is at the Center of American Progress Ideas Conference. Some of the speakers include Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Jeff Merkley, Kristen Gillibrand, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a Matthew Iglesias tweet. It says, there's a very impressive roster of speakers who are going to lose to Bernie Sanders in 2020 here at the Center for American Progress Ideas Conference. Also, in 9 days, the Montana special election for their congressional representative will happen. Rob Quist, who is currently supported by Our Revolution, is in the mix. There was just a recent Google poll where he's up by 7. Of course, some of the other polls, the Gravis, show completely different results. Should be hopefully a close race. And also, I don't think you mentioned the Quinnipiac poll that came out last Wednesday that had the Democrats up by 16 points in the generic ballot.
Yeah.
I think that. Yeah. Also, there's one that came out today by PPP. Democrats up by 11.
Yeah, we
the
got to,
generic poll. So,
you know, I think it's too far out right now, but I mean, these numbers are pretty serious. And I think probably historically, I think if you see these type of generic numbers, you are anticipating a wave election on off year. But, you know, I mean, who knows? I who knows? So it's too early for me to be looking at those polls. But a couple of things I want to say about the Iglesias thing. All right. One, well, there's a couple of things that now that I'm looking at Iglesias, it turns out Israel was the source of the intelligence that Trump gave to the Russians, which is probably why we saw in some of these stories a reference to the fact that intelligence agents were warning Israelis, don't give us any information because we can't trust the president to not blow it. I think look, I don't think those people are going to necessarily lose to Sanders, and I don't think Iglesias has any insight to that. But I think I think it's very possible those could be people who are running. But I also noticed that Cap proposes a jobs guarantee program. I haven't read the details, but that's in his
thing.
Good
for them.
So what is your sense, though, John, about the midterm elections?
Well, I mean, they have a double-digit lead, and obviously it's a long way off. But I mean, as I said before, I mean, Trump's just going to continue to do stupid shit. I can't believe that he's going to get any better. I can't believe people aren't going to back him any more than they already have. It looks pretty good. One of the other things, this is the second poll that they've done for 2020, and I know it's a long time, but I mean, Sanders does have a 13-point lead over Trump. Biden has a 14-point lead. Two of the most interesting things in the crosstabs, 15% of Trump voters said they'd cross over to Sanders, and 14% say that they would choose Biden over Trump. So all this stuff about the 96%, that really does vary quite a bit from poll to poll. And also The Rock was beating Trump 42-37. One other thing about the analysis, everybody keeps using this metric about the districts that Clinton won. So I put together the top 24 closest Republican districts, and is pretty much as I expected. Trump won 13 of those races. Clinton won 11. So I think people should be focused more on the closer races than necessarily the races that Clinton won. And this
Let me just make that
I've
clear to
said
what
this
you're
before.
saying. There's two different ways that people have been approaching this. One is there's an assumption if Clinton wins a district and the Republican won, let's say almost like Tom Price's district, she was a point and a half off from winning there, but it would have been like Tom. That would be in that column. But you're suggesting it's a better. You are more likely to find seats that are going to flip by looking at how close the race was, and in that instance, there's not. There's 13 that Trump won and 12 that Clinton won. I mean, that'll be interesting to compare that. That'll be an actually really interesting comparison if the Democrats, how much. I mean, that's really the way that you would measure the import and how nationalized that the election is, right? If you see more wins in those districts where Clinton won, then you know that it's been more nationalized, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I just think that, I think there's a little bit too much emphasis on this whole, Clinton won this district. But if you have a double-digit generic lead, it will undoubtedly be a wave. It's just going to be, how big is the wave going to be? Is it going to be a 206 wave for the Democrats, or is it going to be a 210 wave for the Republicans?
Right.
630 versus 60. Even if it's a 2006 wave, they'll retake the House.
What do you think about the Senate at this point?
Well, as I was going to talk about, I thought Cornyn, if he was going to be named, I thought they had a good chance, for Beto O'Rourke or Joaquin Castro to win either one of win the race versus Cornyn. Even though he has a plus 26 rating in Texas, there's 28% of the people don't have an opinion at all on him. And so, which is essentially the same thing as Cruz's numbers, but only 12% didn't have an opinion on Cruz. And so, it's going to be hard. I think that if this continues, these generic polls, I think Flake and Heller are going to be gone. There's no doubt about it. And so then you go back. Cruz won his last race by 15 points. Deb Fischer won her last race by 15 points. I think Cruz is, the demographics are shifting in Texas. More people are moving here. Young people trying to find a cheaper place to live, and that's moving everything towards the Democrats, which is great. It's just a matter of holding the seats. The Heidkamp seat, I would say the hardest seats are going to be to hold are going to be the Heidkamp seat, Joe Donnelly, and then McCaskill, Tester, and unfortunately there was one bad poll that had Sherrod Brown down by 3 points to Josh Mandel a couple of weeks ago. I hope Ohio can wake up and go back to the Democratic roots. That's from Gravis, though, which is always favoring Republicans, even though Ossoff just had a 2-point lead in a poll that just came out by them. And so, I think things are really, really turning because of the health care bill, even more so than because of all this
I think you're right about that.
Crap.
I think you're right about that. To be honest with you, I think you're absolutely right about that. I appreciate the call, John. Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you.
It would be interesting to sort of disaggregate that, but I have a feeling these numbers are really, really about the health care bill, and that the rest of the stuff is actually sort of drawing the attention, but not necessarily the people who will really get out and vote, but we'll see. Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Josh from Chicago.
What's on your mind, Josh?
Well, first of all, to repeat what I said before about Tulsi Gabbard, what the fuck is her problem?
Okay.
But did John say that Quist was up 7 in Montana?
I think he did say that. I think he said he's in the mix, not that he's up by 7.
Holy shit. Well, I guess my question was, and this might be thinking a little too far ahead, but because correct me if I'm wrong, there's only one congressional candidate or one representative for Congress in Montana?
I believe so, yeah.
So if Quist could win, and I think that, do you think that this would be like a potential swing state, Montana? Because you get Democratic, basically, your congressman is basically going to function. He's not in the Senate, but it is like a third senator in terms of he's representing the state. Do you think this would be a flippable state?
I guess it theoretically depends on what the who the candidate is, right? I think this is probably in some ways more localized than we would imagine. But I don't know. It's possible. It depends on who the candidate is. Quist, it does appear to be up, but it's not. I don't think by 7. Appreciate the call.
Okay. Wow. All right. Thanks.
Thanks. We got to see that that election is happening in like 8 days. Calling from a 330 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Ryan from Ohio.
What's on your mind, Ryan?
Did you guys know that there's a debate between Bernie and John Kasich tonight on CNN?
No.
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock Eastern time. John Kasich and Bernie Sanders. It's pretty much just John Kasich probably pushing his book.
Right.
But I think it's important. I'm like having all my relatives watch it because it's important to show that progressive policy is better than even the.
I totally agree. This is
middle-leaning conservative.
Every Democrat. I don't think Bernie should be the only person doing it. I think Bernie should do it as many times as he wants, but I think all the politicians should be doing this. I think it's great.
I think Pelosi's going to be there too.
Good. Thanks for letting us know.
Of course. And hey, I think you guys if you guys want to get more donations to your Patreon, you should stop talking about actual news and just start talking about the very important lawsuit that's coming up with the DNC. Most important one in the history of America. More important than U.S. versus Caroline Products or Brown v. Board of Education.
Well, now you're making it sound like you're being sarcastic about it, but really that lawsuit's the heart of democracy in America. And if you listen to Jimmy Reefer or Jimmy Dore or H.A. Goodman, who's also another extremely stable person, I mean highly stable.
Don't forget Joseph Ballin.
Joseph Ballin has made, I mean, look, it comes down to, do you want war with Russia? Do you want Debbie Wasserman Schultz and my wife and this whole other little cabal of them to decide that, hey, let's send out an email where we say Bernie doesn't look good in those pairs of khakis? And that's what you defend every day, just so you can be chummy with Chris Hayes and the MSNBC elite, and it's disgusting. I hope you enjoy your lesbian. I hope you enjoy your lesbian-themed Chablis party, Sam, because the rest of the world is burning because you're a sellout.
Lesbian-themed parties now?
Thanks for the call.
Lesbian-themed parties in the sense of Sam, Rachel, and Chris. There's a theme.
A Square. Amicavoy. I think the Sunday shows. Okay, yeah. A Square. Sam, saw your retweet of Dave Weigel on MSNBC tilting further to the right with the most unpopular Republican POTUS ever. The other night, poor Chris had both Crystal and that woman from WAPO, Ruben Toofer. And now I hear that Hugh Hewitt is getting a show and O'Donnell may be out. This is where you play sound effect. Yeah, no kidding. Wow. So never more important time for Majority Report. Support your freeloaders out there. Old Oprah interview, Sam. Yes, indeed. One more, Nick. So Sean Spicer's definitely going to either kill himself or have a breakdown, right? Yesterday at the press conference, he looked extremely miserable, barely even tried to answer questions. It was reported last night that he was screaming, was heard from a room he and Huckabee and Bannon were in. Also, how long until Trump starts tweeting about Seth Rich? Helter, McConnell's Trump's immunity idol. That Seth Rich thing, I'm just waiting for the Jimmy Dore video before I make a comment. T. Costel, I love that Trump keeps contradicting his own surrogates about a day later. Do you think news channels will ever stop bringing his surrogates on because they clearly waste of time? The poll for 2020 about Sanders and Biden, aren't those the kind of waste of time? Yes. By 2020, they'll both be incredibly old. I mean, I think the waste of time is just like people use it as a way of driving other people out of a race, basically, is what it comes down to. Communist Dog, doing jury duty for the past 2 days. Does that deserve a show far? Well, it's your civic duty, but if you insist. All right. I'm going to go some IMs here. Callers, I'm sorry I can't get to you. Well, I'll take one more phone call. I'm going to pick them random because everybody's just been on for under 10 minutes. Calling from a 505 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Penny from Albuquerque.
Hi, Penny. What's on your mind?
Well, a couple things. One, I wanted to let you know a couple ideas for your sciatica.
Okay.
So one is there's a position it's actually kind of a position in yoga, but it's called Utkatasana. So Michael might be able to help you with this. But if you can do it sitting, where you put your hands on either side of your knees and push your knees into your hands, so that it helps open up where your sciatica gets pressurized from one of your part of your spine.
So wait a second. If I put my hands on my outside, let me just be clear. I'm putting my hands
outside of your knees.
Outside of the knees, and then I'm pushing my knees open, right? So I'm creating some force there.
And resisting with your hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think he's getting the
and
point.
Then you want to make and then you want to make sure that you kind of keep breathing fully while you do it. Okay. You know what I'm talking about, Michael, with the Utkatasana?
I do, but I'm not going to help
sitting, not
him.
standing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Michael, you should push his legs together.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is
I think I just hurt myself.
The other thing, Sam, is I also don't like regular chiropractic because I've had it hurt me in the past.
I will not go to a chiropractor.
But there's a kind that doesn't do that real harsh adjustment. It's not even, they don't even quote unquote crack your back. It's actually a really gentle
don't want them
thing
to touch
called
me.
directional non-force technique.
Nope. I do not That will
Okay.
not happen.
Just
No.
go to a bathhouse and get a massage there,
And then-
child.
No, I don't. I don't like
And then two other-
massages or any type of manipulation of my body.
Huh.
Right. It's yeah. I mean,
Saying a lot there.
It's not at all what. Anyways, it's not at all what normal chiropractic is because I don't believe in it either. I think it hurts people more than helps. But this
He's not going
is
to listen
different.
to you.
But
Just
I'll do the yoga thing,
All right.
although I
But
do
my
actually
final
think I
thing,
hurt
this is
myself
separate from
doing that.
this is not your health issue. One thing I want to yesterday somebody mentioned the difference between loans for getting their PA versus medical training.
Yep.
And at least up until now, in many places in our country, medical schools will give relief to loans, medical school loans, if you're willing to work in a rural community for several years after medical school.
Interesting.
So it is a way that people can get medical training reimbursed and not be burdened with all those loans. Who knows how long that will last in our country? But
right.
Okay, and then finally, I have a quick question. I'm wondering if any of you guys know with the House bill about about preconditions,
Yeah.
whether anyone who's been accused of perpetrating domestic violence is also considered a pre-existing condition, or only the women who are victims of it?
I don't know.
As far as I know, it's the victims.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Yeah, it just feels like one more way that it's a misogynist bill. But
Yeah, indeed.
Well, it makes no sense if you've documented domestic violence, then that's something that you've done, and technically, if the person you've accused hasn't been convicted of anything, then that's the reasoning.
Well, although many men are sometimes, if they're not convicted, it's on the condition that they go for counseling or for help with domestic violence. So they do have to receive services for it. So I would think that could potentially put them in a category that would make it a pre-existing condition. But I wouldn't imagine that a bunch of old white men would see it that way.
Interesting.
So.
Appreciate the phone call.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Thanks to all of you for what you do.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Gonna look that up.
You're supposed to alternate hot and cold too.
Oh, is that what I'm supposed to do? All right. No more phones. I'm going to take, I'll do 4 or 5 here, and then we'll go through the rounds. Anthony from Baltimore. Freud, standing by Freud, Harris analogy from yesterday. The only weakness in the analogy is that Freud at one point in time had influence in the mainstream of his field. Now you'd be incredibly hard-pressed to find any psychologist who takes psychoanalytic theory, Freudism, seriously, with the exception of those who identify as neo-Freudian and revere Freud as a guru. Several studies looked at the efficacy of different psychological frameworks in treating depression and other mental illnesses in those who were treated using psychoanalysis. Freud had symptoms become worse, and those without any treatment were better off longitudinally. There's also a feminist critique of Freud. I could speak volumes as to why Freud is a crack and widely discredited, not a good source for understanding. Interesting historical figure nonetheless, but a lot of parallels between him and Harris. Neff, how can you trust McMaster? He's not wearing a flag pin. Gotcha. Ivanka's apartment. Got to be an old video because Oprah Winfrey's show ended years ago. Boom. It's from 2012.
The YouTube page is up and running, though.
No, it's from 2017 or 2007.
J. Will. Sam, did you watch Pelosi Town Hall? As I watched it, I realized that others must feel like the Dems don't have their shit together. She didn't seem to have a coherent message, talk like Congress still acted cordially like it did decades ago. They can't be this out of touch, can they? I didn't see it. Wood Rabbit, Sammy Applecedar. Saw Katie Couric interview Valerie Plame recently. Can you share some thoughts about the Plame affair and how it might shed some light on today's politics? Oh, and Michael, more corporate retreat Lavrov, please. I don't know. I haven't thought about the Plame thing in a long time. I mean, they were mad that there was somebody in the administration who was not towing the line. And, you know, even the Bush administration, well, I mean, look, it was Valerie Plame's husband, whose name escapes me now, just for the moment.
Joe Wilson.
Joe Wilson. who went to Niger to basically find out about the yellow cake uranium and came back and was like, oh, no, Iraq didn't buy it from anybody. I'm not sure how to might shed some light on today's politics, frankly. I mean, it was, I think that was all part of a whole. I don't think there was anything sort of unique about that at that time, except for it exposed the fact that the Republicans didn't care about what they had attested to about national security and whatnot. It was it's another, just sort of, just another look, essentially, for them. And Bonara, but it's never really austerity. It's austerity for the many and endless generosity for the few. Hey, what voice would Michael use if Michael were to mock himself?
I'd say, let me think about that. It's just so hard to conceive of.
Trickle down Jesus. Would you really want a Messiah who doesn't drive a Ferrari? Senator Cuck Schumer, if Donald has untreated syphilis, do you think Ivanka has it too? Maybe she used her husband's connections to get it cured. Colin Doucet, don't touch or manipulate my body, God damn it. God damn it, Ann, stay out of my bed. I'm so worried about my show with Gary Busey. Do you see? Are you excited for the new season of Game of Thrones? I really want to see Jon and or Tyrion ride dragons this season. Umar Shami. Sam, in the past, Majority Report viewed seemed to be a nuanced capitalism is good for creating wealth, but only with socialism to distribute the wealth and protect people from its being chewed up by its machinery. This appeared to be a view prompted, for example, by interviews about systems in Denmark. It was promoted as an excellent system, created as the happiest people on the planet, and has both capitalistic, socialistic system. But lately, it seems much less nuanced. Capitalism bad viewpoint has taken over. Am I mistaken? I think that's not accurate. I mean, yesterday somebody asked why I wasn't doing a class analysis of things. I mean, I think broadly speaking, I'm probably still a capitalist. But I mean, I think there are several sectors where I think the government could run it more efficiently. Also, it's my view that only through the rapid advancement of technological capability that our species will be the only one ever to be able to fight back against the myriad of ways nature uses to cause extinctions, like the ever-increasing computational power predicted by Moore's. Though theoretically, one can imagine systems not based on greed, accomplishing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I would object to putting technological advancement down to capitalism, especially you look at, I mean, we had that American Amnesia book by Hacker and Pearson about government investment in those sorts of things. Like even like semiconductors, they achieved economics of scale by being bought by the government. Fairchild Semiconductor,
Yes.
all this stuff was government subsidized.
Yeah, I mean, to a large extent, I think like the story of capitalism is, I think, sort of it's a bit of a myth. And I think what we do have is people who pretend that there's some type of free market and that they find mechanisms to basically make that market work in favor of them. And so, and that happens in the context of specific industries, but it also happens more broadly, right? Like, let's get rid of and, more or less make it impossible for unions to function. I mean, even like going back to Taft-Hartley, there is a purposeful, calculated strategy to pretend that none of this happens within capitalism, but it is really people who through, our society inhibit the bargaining power of people who don't have money or capital. And maybe that's a critique of capitalism. Maybe it's a critique of the type of capitalism we have. I'm not sure. Make America steak again. Sam, what do you make of the Seth Rich story going around in conservative media? It's bull crap. Ilmek, this is what happens when president wants bullet points instead of actual President Beasley. I know this isn't progressive, but Lawrence and Hayes are the only ones I watch on MSNBC. SBG, God damn it, at less than 120 days in, Trump has blown GWB out of the water. Worst president of our lifetime, Sam. Oh, indeed. Petrus, I bet Jared plays canasta with Chuck Schumer, Ed Koch, and his Esther. Do you think the YouTube monetization scheme is an attempt by intelligence institutions and corporations to constrain the content of non-sanctioned media and seize the economics of the platform respectively? No. Jay Chivone. Sam Seder, backgammon truther. Erdogan, just now at the White House. I would like to congratulate President Trump for the legendary triumph he achieved in the aftermath of the election. He added, perhaps a noble leader could read a statement about how the Armenians are liars and tried to ruin Turkey 100 years ago. So is the dog named after Big Edie or Little Edie? Offered without comment. Breaking. Trump to give speech on Islam in Saudi Arabia. White House per AFP agency.
Okay, look. A lot of people say that they're pious, but I don't see them at the mosque.
Trump
Sad.
voice. Hey, Ivanka, you want to take off the shrink wrap and play Twister with your daddy? Okay. Matt, go.
S.
Censor sweep. Wait, is backgammon normally played with a deck of cards? No. Kelly.
D.
Dragon Slayer. Nice to see after a sleepless night, Sam is still on his core brand proposition of board game investigation. Michael.
F.
Hold on here. Freedom for Palestine. Have you ever heard of Uncanny Valley? It's when robots become similar to people, but not too similar, so it's off-putting. That's how I currently feel about Trump and Cruz. Not safe to drink. Ivanka has a Nacho Libre game. What the F is Nacho Libre game? I think that's a video. The best statement I've heard on Rubin without saying his name is he claims to be a fighter for free speech, yet absolutely says nothing about the Flint 6 arrest, which is literally a free speech issue. But yeah, let's keep bitching about universities, student protests. Matt.
R.
Ridicule. That Ivanka crap may have been uploaded 3 days ago, but have had to have been taped years ago. Kelly.
S.
Sebastian Gorka. Sam is looking like a social Jewish warrior beta cuck today. Don't worry, MR audience. Soon alpha males will be back.
E.
Easy D. Do you think Tim Allen's cancellation is long overdue retaliation from the cartel for snitching all those years ago? Crapo Zappo. Copy of Nacho Libre seems to be atop Ivanka's game stack. Matt.
E.
Give me another one. Which had an E.
M.
Michelle. The Ivanka video was before her kids, aired originally in 2007. Still fake as shit, though. Kelly.
P.
Pez head. Mitt Romney's Thanksgiving meal after he lost in 2012 came from Boston Market. I can say my Thanksgiving that year was more expensive and more delicious than the Romney family. I hate rich people that don't do rich right. What's the point of starving the poor for these guys? He could have hired a chef and staff to create jobs. Trump also likes eating at McDonald's. Michael.
L.
Louis, 77. You're still a more charitable person than I am. Since November, I've refused to sully the title of president by following it with this name of the limbic deficient orangutan with power life. You. The Constitution doesn't mention segregation or Jim Crow either. Okay, one last round. Matt.
B.
Beefy Richard. Did you just call Mike Huckabee a media slut? I didn't, but I guess I could have. Kelly.
Y.
Why indeed? Do you have another one?
L.
L. Seems reasonable. However, we do not have an L.
H.
Hugo Ball. Hey, Sam, did you ever encounter that arcade with a chicken tic-tac-toe machine near Canal Street? No, I didn't. Michael.
Canal.
Canal Street.
B.
B. B, 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 B.
B,
B, B, silly. Guys, I'm listening to that clip of Trump's speech at the memorial, and he just literally makes me nauseous. He's just gross. It's like a caricature. I'm constantly asking myself how so many people can think this is all okay. It's made me feel alienated from my fellow man. For example, in a restaurant, I'll see a couple red-faced, middle-aged, pudgy white guys with goatees. And under my breath, I mutter Trump voters, and I'm suddenly less comfortable. That's not good, right? Anyway, sorry for slumming the psyche advice. I would just not go out.
Let people surprise you.
And the final I am of the day. Great leap forward. Doesn't shrink wrapping board games just make Ivanka a good Jewish mother? Oh my God, was she even Jewish in 2007? See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the man